Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have Abdallah El Badaoui with us today. Abdallah is a dynamic petroleum engineer, deeply committed with the energy transition, playing an active role in the energy sector. He's a fresh graduate in energy economics and management at IFP School and also Colorado School of Mines. He was sponsored by Tech Foundation. He interned in Total in Tanzania. He was the focal point on the rebranding project of the company. He served as vice president in the SPE IFP School student chapter and as president of the SPE Asia Pacific University, where he led the chapter to win several prestigious awards. Beyond this, his achievements include being awarded as the Energy Leader for Tomorrow in 2020, organizing the talk cycle of Led by Moroni, and receiving the Africa Leading Scholarship for the One Young World Summit in 2022. Without further introduction, let's welcome Abdallah to share the insights of his participation in the COP28. Abdallah, the stage is yours. Thank you very much.
Hi, good morning, good evening, everyone, wherever you're joining today. Thank you very much for the warm welcome. I think it's always nice to come back at IFP and come back to the chapter because we served it last year. So we know how important these events are. So I'm going to try to share a little bit of my perspective of COP28, the journey, and hopefully it will be useful for anyone who would like to attend COP in the future. Yep, so for the agenda, I'm going to give a little bit of intro on climate change and then COP 101 to understand what COP entitles. And then I would explain a little bit how to attend COP and how I got the chance to attend COP. And I will focus on the COP28 and some of the energy perspective, because I think we're all in the energy space. So it's nice to take some of the highlights on the energy perspective and some of the key outcomes and milestones that are achieved this year during COP. And finally, I'll have a small conclusion and Q&A and answer your questions if you have any. Yeah, so going back to the graph, as you can see, like from the 1970s when we started, the Industrial Revolution started, there was a correlation of increase in temperatures. So this is what basically we call climate change, because climate change is real and is due to the economic activities and the burning of fossil fuel. So this year, 2023, actually have seen one of the warmest year on the record, which is a record which didn't go unnoticed, and that's why taking active steps to mitigate climate change is necessary. And then when you look at the greenhouse emission, so 75% come from greenhouse gases are from fossil fuel combustion fuel. So you can see CO2 account for 64%. And then the orange part where you see LU, this is land use basically. And then there is methane. So as you may know that methane actually warms the planet even faster than CO2 because it has a warming capacity, I think, of times 24 compared to CO2, but also it stays longer in the atmosphere than CO2 does. With that, the UNFCCC, which is the UN body on climate change, they have been organizing COP. So it started with the first conference in 1979, and then I think the key year was wait, let me take the laser. Yeah, the key year was the Kyoto Protocol in 2005. This is really set the bar in terms of climate action. And from then there have been COPs until 2021, which was one of the most significant one in Paris, that said that you have to limit the temperature increase by 1.5 degrees Celsius. And in COP26, which happened in Glasgow, I believe, and 27, which happened in Sharm el Sheikh in Egypt, and 2028, which happened in Dubai this year, which I got the chance to attend. So in order for us to move forward in the conversation on climate change, I wanted to tell you guys about two groups of countries in the climate negotiation or climate conversation. So there is Annex 1 and Annex 2 countries. So Annex 1 countries, it's all the countries in green. So these are the historical emitters. These are the people that benefited a lot during the Industrial Revolution, means that they started burning fossil fuel and they developed. And as you can see, it's not surprising that these are the most developed nations of our world. And this is a picture. So there is this differentiated, it's called common but differentiated responsibilities, right? So these are the emitters, but that doesn't mean that being a small emitter, we shouldn't contribute to mitigating climate change. But there should be some kind of understanding that, hey, I emitted less means that I should be able to get some credits in carbon or things like that. So this is, I wanted to just give you the picture. So green is Annex 1 countries, historical emitters, and gray are Annex 2 countries, which are historically non-emitters, but now some of them are emitting, such as China and India, which are also considered as developing nations, but the green one are mostly developed nations. And I wanted to present you to this equation. For those who are at IFP, maybe you have seen it because all the slides are from IFP, which is called the Kaya equation. So the Kaya equation is from this scientist called, his name is Kaya. So he said that people engage in economic activities that require energy, and those energy emit CO2. So there is energy per GDP, there is GDP per population, and there is population. So just to give you an overview, in order for us to reduce the CO2 intensity, we need to reduce these factors, right? And the first one is to reduce the energy, to reduce the CO2 content in ever energy, which is something that we can do as engineers, right? And then the second one is energy per GDP. This means that we should decrease the amount of energy we use for economic activities, which for now is not really feasible, because in order for a country to grow, they need energy for their trade, they need energy for the industries. So this one is something we can put a question mark. And then there is GDP per population, which is economic activity per population, which is something also that is not easy to address, because everyone wants to enjoy some quality of life, and that comes with an increase in GDP. And finally is population. So population is directly correlated with CO2, meaning that as the population increases, the CO2 intensity increases because we burn more fossil fuel, we use more energy, we use more energy basically. So this is a very touchy discussion because scientists have been discussing about this, and some people say that in order for us to decrease the CO2 content, maybe we need to decrease the CO2, the population of the world. But I think you will agree that that's something not feasible, because we all want to reproduce, we all want to have families, extended families, and you cannot choose which population to decrease and which population to increase. So this is a little bit about the Kai equation. I think it's a very nice equation which defines climate change in an equation. So this is the road to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So in COP21 in Paris, they came to the agreement that we need to limit the temperature increase by 1.5 degree. So here I attempted to take a picture from the world in data to show you in perspective the global emitters, right? And coming from the African continent, I like to point out that when you can see that Africa as a whole continent, we emit less than 4% of CO2 in the atmosphere, yet not only Africa, but you can see the least emitters are also the people or the countries that face the highest consequences of climate change. So this is a picture of the most CO2 emitters and how they should be reducing the emissions. And this is the scenarios, the 1.5 scenarios. So this is a 2021 picture, but I'm sure there's an updated one for this year. But there are pledges that every country make when they go for COP, right? So if they go with the pledges that they have done, we would we were at 3.8 gigatons. So we would go a little bit lower. And then this is the stated policy. And then this is, if we do nothing, this is the best case scenario that will go. If we follow our policies, this is where we'll end. And then if we actually follow our pledges, this is where we'll end. And as you can see, this is where we need to get, we need to get to net zero by 2050. So I think you would agree that reducing from 60,000 megatons to almost 0 megatons, it's a hard job to do. And this is where engineers like ourselves need to be smart and need to be very active in order to reduce the cap, even if the ideal is to get to net zero by 2050, obviously, right? But every little that we do and the closer we get, the better. So as engineers, our job is to make sure that we get closer as soon as possible and as fast as possible. I wanted to ask this question to the audience, and if anyone would like to answer, feel free. Does anyone know what does COP stand for? COP? Feel free to keep it in the chat if. Yeah, so COP stands for Conference of Parties. And does anyone know how many parties approximately attend COP every year? I'll give it a second for you to think about. So there are about 190 parties that participate in COP every year. And finally, maybe I answered this, but what COP set the 1.5 degree goal for the whole world? It was the Paris COP in 2020, COP21 in 2015 that happened in Paris. So just going to give you an overview of COP 101, what happens at COP and what do people do at COP. So first, to understand COP, you need to understand that there are different zones. So there is the blue zone, there is the green zone, and there is the orange zone, which is the whole city where the country is hosting COP. And then the green zone, it's where there is a lot of events happening on the side. There are pavilions, there are campaigns, the protests. So this is all happening in the green zone. And then the blue zone, that's where the negotiators are. So you have countries, delegates, which are called parties, and then you have UN bodies, you have negotiators, you have media, and then you have also observers. So this is where the blue zone is where the heart of COP happens, but the green zone is very important because this is where the pressure comes from. This is where the civil society is watching. This is where people are organizing side events and showing technologies that can get us to net zero. And when you come to the blue zone, there are basically negotiating tables, right? You have the observers. So the observers are people who come there to basically watch the negotiations and see how things are coming. So this is usually civil societies, NGOs, and things like that. And then you have parties. So parties is each government. They send their delegation with the head negotiator coming to negotiate the future of the country and the pledges that they want to meet. And then you have the COP presidency. So these are the moderators of the session. So for 2023, it was the UAE. So it was headed by Sultan Al Jaber, who was the CEO of ADNOC, but he was the COP28 president for this year. And then you have different blocks. So different blocks these are regional blocks, right? So you'll have, for example, the African Union, you have the European Union. Every country has some kind of affiliation with the group, and these are called blocks. And then you have the media personnel. So these are the people that are coming to watch to report everything that happens at COP to make sure that it goes to the general public. So for Comoros, because I was part of the Comoros delegation, these are the negotiating blocks that we are part of. So we are part of the Alliance of Small Island Nation, or called IOCIS. So these are the small countries, small nations around the world that are very vulnerable to climate change. So we are part of this block. The second block that we are part of is the least developed countries, or called LDCs. So these are the countries that basically developing countries. So there are 48 group members, I believe. So Comoros is part of it. And the final one, we're also part of the African group, we're part of the Arab group, and we're part of the G77 China. So this is one of the largest group of developing and middle income nations that are regrouped together. And the president of this group this year was Cuba. So Cuba was moderating the sessions. So what happens is at COP, you meet with your blocks. There are block meetings, and then you discuss what you want to go negotiate. Let's take IFP school as a block, right? So before we go for COP, we all at IFP school, we come together. We're like, hey, we're going to this gathering of schools or gathering of SP chapters, and this is what we want, right? So you go together, you negotiate as a block. And then for Road to Dubai, so these are the expectations that people wanted to meet in Dubai. As you know that we have to limit to 1.5 degree here, and now the temperature is around plus 1.2 degree. And if we do with the current pledges that government have done, we will reach 2.4 degree by 2100 and 2.7 by 200 to 100 also, right? So we want to make sure that we stay in the blue zone. So these are some of the expectations that we were hoping to have at COP28 that I will explain later what happened. And then every country, they submit something called the NDCs, so nationally determined contributions. So every country has a milestone to reach, right? So they have to update that every year, and when they go for COP, they have to say basically what they have done in the previous year to achieve the NDCs. So usually the speech is given by the president and also by the ministries. So there are a lot of people who come in, but the president of the country is basically the head of the delegation of that specific country. So they give an update on their NDCs. So the key things that people were looking for at Dubai this year was mitigation, climate adaptation, climate finance, and loss and damage. So to give you an overview, loss and damage is basically the Annex 2 countries, right? So the Annex 1 countries have pledged to give, I think, $100 billion by 2020, if I remember well, to countries in Annex 2, basically to adapt to climate change. Climate finance is basically unlocking finance to renewable energy and other technologies to mitigate climate change. And also, don't forget about indigenous societies that need climate finance to adapt and mitigate basically their climate change. And so this was, again, the road to Dubai. So this is the things that have been done. These are the things that are necessary to do. As I said, finance is very, very important. Just transition also is very important to make sure that we all transition together. And these are the outcomes that people were looking for. So first is triple renewable capacity. So people call it triple up, double down, and phase out, right? The one in yellow. So first, we want to triple up our renewable capacity to 11,000 gigawatt, increase energy efficiency, because the best source of energy is the unused energy. And I believe up to almost at least 60% of the energy we produce is wasted. So how can we make sure that the energy we already produce, we make sure that it's efficient enough? And then cut methane emissions, because as I told you, from oil and gas, because as I told you, methane is a far greater greenhouse effect. It has a greater greenhouse effect than CO2, and it stays longer in the atmosphere. So we need kind of to mitigate that. So I'm going to give you an overview. I gave you an overview of how COP happens and the processes and the outcome and the things that we're expecting for this year. And I'm going to give you an overview on how to attend COP and how I attended COP personally. So first of all, you have to get a nomination by a party. So nomination can come from an NGO, can come from a country, can come from civil society and media. So you have to get accredited. So myself, I wrote to my government. I wrote to the Ministry of Environment. And I told them that I go to Colorado School of Mines, I go to IFP school, and these are things because I was doing my master's in energy economics. So we're exposed to climate change and negotiations. So I told them that we're exposed to this and I would like to join my country's delegation to attend and see how things happen. They replied positively, and then there is someone called the focal point. So he will nominate you to COP, and you will get this email with the letter showing you that you are allowed to attend COP. Second thing is you apply for a visa. So because it was happening in Dubai, so the UAE made it very easy for you to apply for visa. You just had in 2 clicks, less than 20 minutes, you get your visa approval. But the hard part is getting funding, right? So for me, I reached out to all the SPE chapters that I know because I wanted to get sponsorship through the SPE or to get through the IFP school. But ISP North Emirates, which is the one in Dubai, replied positively because I've known them from before. We worked together in several projects and we organized webinars together. So they were really happy to sponsor me to go there. And I'm really grateful for them because I got the accreditation, but without the funding, I would not have been able to go. So this happened in a span of a week, 3 days. But I would recommend you to start very early if you want to go. You want to go for COP to getting the accreditation and getting the funding. These are things that go together. You have to try to get both of them together at the same time. So what to expect at COP? So when you go for COP, it's 2 weeks of negotiations, right? So it's for us, it started on 30th of November and it ended on 12th of December, sorry. So these are the thematics. So every day there was a different day, different theme, right? So there was the opening and then there was the World Climate Action Summit. So this is when the president speaks. So all the presidents of each country, they come here and speak to deliver their NDCs. And after that, the president actually leave the conference, and then you have each day you have different themes. Then you had health, you have finance, you had energy, you had land and urbanization, and then there was one day of rest where people are not going for COP, just to rest and to be back at work. And then there was youth and children, there was nature, food, and agriculture. And finally, there was the negotiations. So during all this week, there is also some part of negotiations where ministers are meeting, the blocs are meeting to prepare for the final negotiations. For myself, I did not attend the whole 12 days. I attended from the 30th to the 6th. I left on the 7th. So I attended the Energy Day, which I would talk about it in the next few slides. So COP28 has been great personally because also it has been one of the most inclusive COPs. We had a lot of young people, we had a lot of people from the civil society, we had a lot of people, indigenous people. So that's one of the themes that they wanted to tackle this year to be the most inclusive COP. And personally, I think they did it. And then they had frontline communities and indigenous people. You had finance people, so you had a lot of the banks that were very active. Had a lot of companies coming all over because they believe that there is the market component, the business component that could accelerate the action to climate change, basically. So these are some pictures of during COP. So this is my badge. These are some people that I've met before in conferences, and this was the desk from my country. So this is where most of my country's delegation, they would negotiate, they would talk if they had speeches. And I met Kamel Ben Nasser. So this was the SPE president in 2022, I believe. So he's a really nice guy, and I bumped into him. He served in SPE Global. He was the SPE International. And then this guy was the African Bank of Development manager, director, the president of the African Bank. He's called Adesini. So it's very nice because you get to meet like global leaders, right? So you might just but must be walking like that, and then you meet the president of this country. You can ask for a picture. You can talk to him. You can ask him questions. So it's very dynamic, and everyone is almost equal. Just that, of course, the high personalities they're guarded, but they're not as heavily guarded as you find them in your country. So you can actually talk to them. You can converse with them, of course, if they allow you to. Then this is another picture. This was during the opening ceremony. This is the head of the WHO, Mr. Dr. Tedros. And then this is the Crown Prince of Malaysia, of Pahang, for Hajar. And then this is the president of my country. I met him during one session that we had. And then this session was by African president. They were discussing the future of green energy in Africa. So this is one of the sessions that I personally attended. So what were the key outcomes of COP and what were people expecting? So first, there was the operationalization of loss and damage funds, which was a very key because, as I told you, Annex 1 countries promised to give Annex 2 countries to adapt to climate change, but they never kept the money. They never gave the money to that fund. So it took so many years. But this year it was finally Excuse me. So this year it was finally operationalized, which means that it was set and people contributed to it. So the UAE, I think they contributed $100 million, and then some other countries followed suit and they contributed some amount of money to this fund. But then now there is the challenges that comes. How do we use these funds? How do people access to this fund? But those are things that are later negotiated in the negotiation table. And then 118 countries have signed the Global Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Pledge, which means, as I told you, to triple up renewable energy and double up energy efficiency to make sure that the energy that we produce, we use it efficiently. And then there were some of the key negotiation outcomes. So there was the global stock take. So I don't understand. I can't tell you in detail like what it entails, but basically it's the NDCs. They were remember what I told you about the national determined contribution for each country, right? So this year they were supposed to review that and then come up with the new targets. So this is the global stock take that they had to look at. And then there was the framework on resilience, loss and damage funds, as I told you, that was got operationalized. There was the just transition work program. So because when you look at it, the access to energy, for example, is not equal to all countries, right? Not all countries emit the same, as I showed you in that picture with Africa having 4%. So there was need to be a discussion on how we make sure that everyone transition at the same pace, so that it's fair for everyone. And then there was mitigation work program and youth climate champions. So these are young people that are very active in the space of climate change to make sure that their voices are heard and there is accountability, basically. And in terms of energy, there was the oil and gas decarbonization charter that was signed this year. So there was some CEO president that attended COP this year. And some of the key action was investing in renewable and low carbon fuels and negative emission technologies. So you think about carbon capture, increased transparency in carbon and in greenhouse gas emission reporting, increase alignment with industry and accelerate to a net zero, and finally reduce energy poverty and providing secure and affordable energy to all. So basically, this is to encourage oil and gas companies to really follow their strategy and get to net zero by 2050, to invest in renewable energy, but also to make sure that we decrease the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. And this was the Energy Day at COP. So I got the chance to attend some of the events organized by Rystad Energy. So the CEO came to Dubai and he was explaining a little bit about the future of energy. So Rystad Energy is an intelligence group that is based in Oslo. And they were explaining basically the outlook and how they see the future of energy. And then we had dinner with the CEO and we had a golf session. So it was pretty cool event to have. And then I got the chance to be part of a panel organized by North Emirates. So they were my sponsors. And in return of the sponsorship, they organized an event to have me and some other colleagues to talk about COP, our experience, and how it was going. So some of you may know Cassandra. So she was the SPE Young Professional Chairperson. So she was also at COP. So it was a good experience to share what we have learned during COP to an SPE, just like I'm doing today virtually, but we had the physical event in Dubai. So to give you a summary of Dubai and of COP28 and being involved in the climate space, I think the first thing I would say is build bridges, but not walls. Basically, we are engineers, right? We work in the fossil fuel industry or in the energy space, but we shouldn't limit ourselves to that. We should be very active and interested in getting meaningful climate action. And that starts by engaging with climate activists, engaging with people who are involved in the climate space. I think that's important. And that's how myself I got into this space is I attended conferences and I got attracted by these kind of things, and I wanted to be a basically bridge between the two extreme, right? Because we're in the energy space, but we also need to care about the climate because this is where we all live. Second is get interested and active in climate action. It starts very small at your school, being sustainable, but also on a larger scale on the operation that we do to make sure that we reduce our carbon intensity and our carbon emission. Your network is your net worth. It's a sentence that I love really much, but I think my experience at COP made me realize that without being able to take the first step to write to my government and not having a network, for example, the SPE to sponsor me, I wouldn't have been able to attend COP. But because I had built relationship with people, I was able to ask them for this kind of opportunities, and I was able to attend. So really, your network is your net worth. And COP can be very overwhelming if you don't have a plan. So I would suggest if any of you get the chance to attend COP one day, to really have a plan because it can be very tiring. And yeah, so it was very overwhelming for me because it was my first time and I was not prepared much. And you should go there with the attitude to learn. I think when you go there, you'll meet climate activists, you'll meet civil society, you'll meet a lot of people, right? And try your best to learn from every person that you can, because at the end of the day, we're all fighting for the same cause. And finally, you need to be very patient because it's very political, right? It's not the technical events that we usually attend, but this is a very political scenario. There's a form of lobbying, there's a form of activism. So you need to be patient because things don't happen just like in the private sector where you just do like this and things happen really quickly, right? So there is that factor that you have to keep in mind, and it's very hardcore diplomacy. So people are negotiating, people are discussing. It's a very different from the setting, the corporate setting that we are used, or the academia setting that we're used in school. Yeah, that's one picture I had with the Unite, Act, and Deliver I wanted to share. And yeah, thank you very much. So that's a wrap. I hope I was not talking too fast, and I'm happy to get any questions that you may have. And the previous one was called the Paris Agreement, the 1.5 degree. So for this year, it was called the UAE Consensus to explain to show the agreement that was done. And there was one key outcome of this year that I forgot to mention, but for the first time in the text of the UAE consensus, it says that we need to phase out fossil fuel. Though people are saying, debating because it's still a little bit vague. We don't know what year we have to phase out and things like that, but at least now it's in the text. So now we have to work towards that. With that, I thank you very much for your time, and looking forward to take any question if any of you have.
Well, thank you very much, Abdallah. It was a very interesting presentation and very helpful for those that want to apply for the next COP. Now we're going to open the round of questions, so you can send it to the group, and I will also allow you to turn on your mics. So if someone wants to ask the question, you can just open the mic or send it to the chat, and I will read it to Abdallah.
So I have a question. Firstly, thank you so much for presenting about your experience at the COP28. And I'm looking like for this year, it's gonna be in Azerbaijan, if I'm not mistaken, in Baku.
Yes.
So my question is like during the final day of COP28, there was like an agreement mentioning the end of the fossil fuel era to push like more about energy transition. And what is your personal opinion about ending the fossil fuel era for you?
Okay, so I think what I like to explain this kind of question is looking at the data, right? So when you look at the data, the ambition gap is very big. And in the most ambitious scenario of the IEA, which is the scenario that most people use, by 2050, we still need fossil fuel, right? So I still think that fossil fuel will be part of our lives, but we need for a long time, but we need to find a way to make sure that it's less harmful. And I am one of the people who support renewable energy because we need, there is a gap, but there is a problem with renewable energy. We talk about intermittencies, right? So if there's no sun, if there's no wind, how do we tackle those kind of things? So that's when we come for batteries, right? But the battery technology is not yet advanced enough to tackle that issue. So I think it's a good start to have them in text saying that there is the end of fossil fuel. We need to agree that at some point, every good thing has an end, right? So even the bad things have an end. So there will be an end for fossil fuel. Will it happen in our era? Will it happen in 100 years? Will it happen in 50 years? We don't know, but we need to get there as soon as possible and mitigate climate change. And with that, there is the factor of just climate transition, right? So for example, the Annex 1 countries, the developed countries, right? They already enjoy some quality of life that developing nations don't have that. So giving you a number in Africa, for example, we have one of the lowest electrification rates in the whole world, right? So in order for us to meet that demand, we need to solve the energy trilemma, which is accessible, affordable, and sustainable, right? And ending fossil fuel may be unfair for other people who were not developed yet, right? So there is this political, philosophical, but also technical conversation that we need to have. And my opinion is it's good that it's already in text. We know when to end fossil fuel, but it has to have a just transition, making sure that we leave no one behind, making sure that it's not unfair for other people, that other countries are developed, the others aren't developed, and then we're like, hey, now that you want to develop, stop that, just throw away your fossil fuel, right? So there needs to be that balance. And I think there is no a clear-cut answer to the question. It's more of a conversation and trying to find a consensus between people.
Yes, thank you.
Right. Yep, we have another question on the Q&A chat box. What is the COP's message to young professionals? That is, what decision makers expect from young people in climate action? From Louis Philippe.
Okay, I think that's a good question. What I would say is this COP28, at least, it was very clear that young people are part of the conversation. I think for the first time there was a youth and children day, which didn't happen before. And as a young professional, I think we have so much to contribute. When you go to this kind of conversation, you realize that there is also a generation gap, right? Most of our leaders, as you know, they're old people, and then they have a lot of experience, right? And then us, we have a lot of young people, don't have experience, but we have the energy, right? So we need to have that bridging the gap. As I told you, build bridges. So building bridges is also intergenerational, making sure that we are part of this conversation, because at the end of the day, the consequence of climate change is not the leaders of today, which are ruling the world, we're going to face them, but it's going to be our generation. And I think it was a very good positive step that COP28 this year included the Children Day and the Youth Day, a lot of young people But it also comes with us that we need to get political at one point. We need to be active and seek this kind of knowledge. So that the message that I think COP28 was sending, and generally I would encourage every one of you, even if you don't attend COP, but at least follow the negotiations, follow the outcomes, follow what happens out of it. There are a lot of companies that release report on a daily basis during COP. So try to be on top of it to understand what's happening, because again, it's our common future, our shared future, which is in play.
Great. Thank you very much. We have another question from Cheryl. I was curious about the block negotiations that are taken to COP. I also saw that in one block there might be more than 30 countries. What if some of these countries do not agree with what they are planning to negotiate in COP? Do they only follow the majority, or every country has to agree?
Okay, that's a very, very good question, which I also asked myself, because I think we'll agree that when we want to go out as friends, we already have a problem, because one person want to go for Chinese, one person want to go for French food, another one want to go for Arabic food, right? That's only group of 5 friends. And so you can imagine countries, so they all don't agree on the same stuff. There are things that they agree, there are things that they disagree. And the things that they agree, that's their power, right? Because when they go for a negotiation, they're like, these are the things that we want. And some countries can be like, hey, for example, taking the example of Cheryl, we may all agree that we want to go to IFP canteen for lunch on Sunday, right? And one person, for example, Nicolas says that, hey, I don't want to go to IFP school. I want to go to, I don't know, the kebab place next to IFP. Another person says that, hey, I think I want croissant, right? But because we're all group of people, we're like, okay, maybe this time let's go to the IFP canteen, let's eat there. Then next week we can go to the kebab or we can have a croissant, right? So there is this kind of negotiation that within the block happen, that people agree to disagree, right? There are some points that are non-negotiable, some points are more negotiable. So it's not always that they would agree on the same things. Sometimes the whole block wants something, and 5 to 3 people, they don't want that thing, but they would support their block. And then when they come to the details and the resolution, they will give their opinion that, hey, I think this is good, but we need to do this to make sure that I agree with this. So it's basically negotiation all the way, making sure that you make everyone happy on the table, not 100% happy, but maybe 60, 50, 40% happy. So it's kind of a negotiation, as I said.
Right. Yes, super understandable, and also you have to take into account the possibilities of the country. It isn't just agreeing or disagreeing. Maybe there are sometimes that I can agree with you that I want to go to, as you using your example, that I want to go to eat at some restaurant, but maybe I cannot afford it. So it's also another thing to take into account. Well, here we have another question of Edigan. Thank you for your presentation, Abdallah. My question go to you and everyone here who might be help. I am a fee aspirant who is seeking for sponsorship. How can I go to meet international sponsor willing to help me? And I think that must be related both for you and for us. But if you want to give some insight.
Yeah, for sure. I think, as Cheryl said, there is a finance day coming up with IFP School is organizing. So you should check the IFP page, because I think next week or the following weeks there is an event telling you how to get sponsors, basically. But my advice to get sponsorship is look first in your country. Some of the companies that operate in your country, if you are an energy producing or oil and gas producing country. That's the number one. Number two is contacting people on LinkedIn. Don't be shy. Maybe you write to 10 people, only one person will reply, but you just need one yes, right? So don't care. Just keep sending messages to people.
Right. For our part, we are going to organize a roundtable of SPE the 1st of February, so you can attend there, and we'll be giving more insights and details on the application process and the sponsorships available. But yes, as Abdallah said, you have to look everywhere you can, and every help is more than welcome.
Hi, Abdullah. I had one question for you. My question is related to the sponsorships that you mentioned. Like, how should a professional or a young professional should like hunt for sponsorship to attend the COP conferences? So that's my basic question. Like, what would be your suggestions, or how should one move ahead with the sponsorships?
Yeah, I think it's very difficult to get sponsorship,
Yeah.
to be honest. And I just got lucky that I wrote to SP North Emirates. You have to tell them that what are you adding value to their chapter? What are you adding value to their organization? I think that's the most important. Just like we write sponsorship letters to attend IFP, same thing. You write the same thing, but to attend COP. And I have know that there are a lot of sponsorship available for different blocks, right? So developing countries, there are sponsorship for that. Countries that are least in the global south, least represented, right? You can attend the scholarship, and maybe I'll try to send a link later. Maybe you guys can send to everyone who attended. But there are some groups that have joined on WhatsApp, right? People that organize events, people that are active in the climate space. So they share the links of sponsorship, share links of a lot of things. So you just keep applying. And towards when you get closer to COP, a lot of organizations are active to have people go. So you try your luck. And another thing maybe I would say is, for example, this year, COP28, they chose, I think, 100 people from all over the world, 100 young people from all over the world to attend, and they paid everything for them. So I think you just have to look at the opportunities and apply for them, just like IFP. It's, as I said, it's hard, but it's not impossible. And you just have to highlight what you want to do in the climate action, why you want to go. Personally, what I like to say is I'm from the energy space, and I want to bridge the gap between energy and climate change, because when you go to climate conferences, you just have only climate activists. When you come to technical events, you only have engineers, right? So how can we make sure that we have conversation between these two sides of the story? So that would be my advice in terms of trying to secure sponsorship.
Okay, thank you.
Well, someone else that have some question? If no one else has a question, I think that I have one last question that we can use to close the event. And I wanted to ask you for that, in your opinion, what do you think that will be the two most important actions to take in order to achieve the goals set in the COP28?
Can you come again? Can you repeat the question?
Yes. What do you think that will be the two most important actions to be taken in order to achieve the goals set in COP28?
Yeah, I think the most important is climate finance, right? Unlocking businesses to be able to lend money to increase renewable, right? Because we want to triple up the number of renewable energies that we have all over the place, right? And as you know, renewable energy right now is not cheap, right? It's getting cheaper, but it's not cheap yet, right? So in order for you to, for example, I'm not talking about individual people like keeping solar panel on your rooftop, but like really mass industrial solar panels, to power a whole country, to power a whole community. Those things, they need people, they need banks to really give them money to finance those kind of projects, right? So I think climate finance is very, very important. Some people talk about the loss and damage funds, right? Which I think it's good, but there needs to be a clear criteria on how do you access those funds, how do you use those funds, that's very important. So the loss and damage funds is really, really important, but as long as the clear criteria, it's like saying, hey, we're going to a restaurant and you don't know the budget, it's very hard for you to decide what you're going to eat and things like that and how you're going to get that money. And I would say in terms of us engineers, young professionals, right, we need to look at how to make energy more efficient, because if we can really make energy efficient, like a priority, we will reduce a lot of the energy which is wasted, and in return the CO2 that we emit, that is also wasted. So for me, I would say that's one of the most important. I would say climate finance, loss and damage, and tripling up renewable. I mean, climate finance, loss and damage, and the last one, energy efficiency. I really believe in energy efficiency, that it would really be a game changer if we were able to manage it. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It was very interesting. And so it was a pleasure to have you around. You are always part of the chapter, so thank you very much in the name of all the chapter and all the guests. Thank you, everybody.